Good morning. It's great to be back at the Talent Digital Summit. Let me introduce our three panelists here. We have a partner at Plural. Welcome, Sten Tamkivi. Welcome. Next to Sten here, we have the head of international defense from Palantir Technologies, the Honorable Shon Manasco. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Bertrand, Rondepierre, many of you now already know, General Manager at AMIAD, which is the French Agency for Artificial Intelligence in Defense. Bertrand, welcome. Now, I would love actually, before we get into our conversation here today, which is code conflict and cooperation, for us to actually be able to meet you a little bit more, but then also meet our audience. So let's have a quick introduction here. Sten, you're a prominent Estonian entrepreneur, our Estonian on the stage here today. You are the founding partner of the venture capital firm Plural, which invests in early stage European companies. I'll be coming to you shortly to learn a little bit more about that. Shon, if I understand correctly, you have a background in both military service and the private sector. Okay. You're a US Army veteran and have held senior civilian leadership roles, okay, within the Department of Defense. And Bertrand, AMIAD is the central pillar for France's military AI strategy. Young organization created just under 18 months ago. You report directly to the French Minister of the Armed Forces. So now that we know our panelists a little bit, we'd love to get to know you a little so that we can understand who we are talking to. Through the lens of our panel, code, conflict, and cooperation, let's use those and find out who we have in the audience. If you are in the code camp here, so you're working for a technical organization, can we put your hand up, please? We can. All right, yeah, we've got a few in here. How about from the conflict lens? Hands up those of you that are working in the military or the defense sector. Okay, few going up there as well. How about from the cooperation perspective? Working in government, policies? Oh.
Interesting.
Interesting, okay. Any investors in the house? Okay, all right, so into our topic. Wonderful, thank you. Now, warfare today is looking very, very different from it did just a few years ago, and it's evolving at machine speed. AI is reforming defense, security, how we defend our borders, how we procure weapon systems and develop them. And let's not forget also our intelligence, encryption, situational awareness, and counterterrorism. This is causing us to ask many critical questions, and how can we acquire and master the tools of this new arms race? Should we outsource the military capacity, chase our sovereign strategies, or build new doctrines? Sten, as our Estonian here on the stage, can you tell us about Plural, what you are doing, and how you are contributing to the European tech defense?
Yeah, Plural is I love the opening of this, where there's one investor, 5 coders, and 100 people trying to make them cooperate. But in Plural, we deal with these first 2 camps. We created this structure a little over 3 years ago. It's an early stage venture capital fund where all the partners are former founders and CEOs. So we're bringing this sort of founders backing founder style of investing at scale to Europe. Over the 3 years, we've raised 800 million euros into our first 2 funds. We've backed 50 plus companies in like 8 or 9 European countries already. And to bring it to the defense topic, we are generalists. We are looking for the most ambitious things that come out of Europe and could sort of lift European GDP, building these tech companies and global champions from Europe. But the most ambitious founders typically gravitate and flock towards the biggest issues of our time. And obviously, since we started the fund, also things like Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine and sort of this overall anxiety around the defense has meant that Europe has had this renaissance of ambitious founders going after defense in particular. And so in our portfolio, we ended up, we backed Helsing as one of the sort of the top European growth companies in defense. We backed Labris that we probably touch upon a bit later. We have a number of investments in the space domain and so forth, and a few things that we haven't published yet. So it's kind of like we went into this finding the people that build meaningful things, and part of that is also defense. And the other thing is that Plural has 2 has had 2 locations to date. It's Tallinn, the global hotspot of startups in the world, and London, which is not bad either. And now we just yesterday announced a new partner in Paris. So as we expand, we have always had half our team on the NATO's eastern flank. And that means that the way we see the urgency of defense and the meaningfulness of the work that these founders are doing, I think is amplified by the fact that these problems in this corner of Europe are very tactile.
So this renaissance, which is generating the energy, but then, as you say, also putting it out from a geographical perspective.
Absolutely. It's Estonia. This basically means, or if you look at the map of Europe, you have about 100 million people living on the eastern flank, which means they have a direct border with Russia, and the 20% of Europe doesn't need an explanation what that means. Like, we all have family stories of what happened the last time these guys came in, and we intend to never let that happen again.
Definitely. So I'm going to come across to Shon. Palantir Technologies, and we're just talking about this border. It's been deployed in support of Ukraine. What are the key capacities that Palantir is developing and deploying for its national clients?
Thanks, Kristen. And it's great to be here and with these esteemed colleagues. So we were actually deployed our software in support of Ukraine's in 48 hours. And so we've been there for the duration. And in essence, what we were able to help them do is to provide a platform that they can then use to fuse sensor data from on orbit, in air, on the ground, do that in real time at operational speeds. So they have a clearer sense of what is happening in and around them, and then ultimately for them to make the very best decisions on how to employ weapons in defense of their nation. And so we've worked, like I said, with them for quite some time, and it's fair to say that the character of war is changing quite rapidly. And this platform that they are employing is AI enabled, and so this is not a theoretical concept in terms of defense. This same technology is being employed across many different combat areas today. And it's one of the reasons, given the successes of the platform in Ukraine and in other spots, it's one of the reasons why NATO has elected to acquire the software as well. Importantly, in the spirit of cooperation, it's really about, from our perspective, how can we create critical infrastructure that then other software firms can employ on top of that capability to bring it to the warfighter.
Okay, and I want to riff on that with my first question to you, Bertrand. So AMIAD's overall strategy, you've just told us a little bit, is to accelerate from AI, from experimentation into robust operational capabilities. Beyond this mission, what is your vision for the agency? Is it to act as an in-house developer, these sovereign systems, a prime contracting manager? How do you see your role here?
All of that?
All of them.
No, I mean, I have a few strong convictions. One is, let's put it another way. Like, there is a big failure mode that I've seen in governments, and I don't think you will contradict me on that front, which is we see IT as something we just procure, and we just ask for capabilities and stuff, and we just wait for it to be delivered. That just doesn't work. That has never worked in the last decades, maybe plural. And so my belief is that even if you don't do anything internally, you have to have the expertise internally to even build things yourself if you're not able to rely on industrial partners. And so, in any case, we need that kind of expertise. Even if we want to work in a good way with industrial partners, we need to have that expertise in-house to help us guide exactly what is a need and how to get there in terms of systems. And so the vision for the agency is, one, in short, being a good partner for industrial companies, like being clear on what we want, how we want it, how to integrate into the systems, how to access the data, like all the stuff that you need to actually figure out in order to deliver an operational system. And on the other way, there are, let's put it that way, there is a few topics where the need for sovereignty is pretty high, and we want to make sure that we keep our hands on very specific systems and very specific use cases. And for those, it's basically us or no one. And so for those very specific cases, we have and we are building teams who will be able to deliver those very specific use cases. But when you look at the broader picture, like the agency, so we are 150 right now, which is pretty big. Like we are indeed, we created the agency 18 months ago, and we will be 300 by the end of next year. But even with that, there is no way we are able to deliver on all the systems and capabilities we need to deliver. And so for me, like in the coming year, the key thing is how do we scale ourselves, and how do we scale ourselves in terms of working internally, but also working with industrial partners in a way that gets us in a position where we have some kind of sovereignty. I'm not going to expand too much right now. Sovereignty in terms of we have systems, we manage them, we are able to operate them, and if we lose our industrial partners, we can still do things. And if we don't have the engineers in-house, and if you don't have the capability to do that, well, you're just stuck with whatever you have on the external world.
Definitely, and there is this very much this sovereignty v speed and scale dynamic and question that comes into play here. So we've set the scene there a little bit. I want us to get into the actual practical, some of the practical examples here from each of you. Shon, so Palantir's software is, and you mentioned this, I believe, responsible for fusing many of the data together from drones, from satellites, even from civilians as such. Can you share with us a concrete example of how you're doing this and how you're taking disparate data points and turning them into actionable, useful data and solutions?
So at Palantir, we're not a data company, but we are a data integration company. So this idea of sovereignty, I think, is really, really important. So Bertrand and I'd like to see this very clearly. So here, I'll give you an example. I have to be careful a little bit about what I say with respect to Ukraine, but I'll give you an example in the Pacific, where you have partner nations sharing the same underlying software baseline, jointly developing targets, sharing information that they are comfortable with sharing, enriching those targets such that you can, in a matter of minutes, go from target identification, target development. You can have AI validate what the human believes to be true, and then you can actually deliver a kinetic outcome, and you can do that all in one platform, all at a few clicks of a button, and you can reduce the decision cycle from hours, oftentimes, to minutes. And that's really important when you're thinking about what's happening even here in Europe with the mass of drone incursions. The cognitive load that puts on humans is enormous. And so you should never send a human to do something that a machine can. And as it turns out, these machines can do quite a lot. And so the way we think about it is, while the IT teams are really important, if you can create a platform where practitioners can use these sets of tools, employ these algorithms, to really explore what the limits of what those algorithms are, then what you can begin to do is create an ecosystem within your own organizations that is quite powerful. And so that's one concrete example of how the systems are being used today, not only in the Pacific, but they're being used today here in continental Europe.
Thank you. And Bertrand, coming across to you with a similar question. AMIAD, you're working on a range of different AI applications, from detecting deepfakes to developing drone jamming systems. Can you share with us, please, an example of a system, an AI system that you're currently working on, perhaps command assistance, embedded systems, and how it is actually providing some capability that was previously unattainable for us?
Yeah, let me give you two examples. One is, those are very different. I was saying just before in the keynote, the reality is also a bit different from what we wish we would be. As in, when you talk about conducting operations, there is a lot of text files and spreadsheets that are being exchanged. I mean, even if it's kind of, low tech or old tech, I don't know, but this is a real thing. And so, even bringing what everyone else is doing, which is LLMs, conversational assistants, in order to speed up a little bit the speed at which you write documents, you write briefs, and everything. I mean, this is already something that everyone else is doing. There is nothing specific to defense, but just that is kind of the crossroads of a lot of problems between infrastructures, computes, IT systems, and everything. And so just that, I mean, you don't necessarily need an AI agency, but you need to fix all the problems I was talking about just before. And although it's not very sexy, if I can put it that way, it's very important because this is what's actually delivering value on the field. If I take a more fancy example, otherwise you would be disappointed, I think about electromagnetic intelligence, for example. We are building foundational models to better understand signals. I will not dive too much into specifics, but when you look at the data from the sensors, everything that has been done for text, for speech, for example, can be generalized to the electromagnetic spectrum more generally. And so getting models on military data that are able to understand the content and what's happening on the battlefield, especially what we see in Ukraine with everything being jammed, you have no signal or it's hard to get anything to go through there. Having models, foundational models that understand, and AI that understand what's there in the electromagnetic spectrum opens a completely new field of opportunities in terms of military effects we can have on the battlefield.
Okay, thank you. And it was interesting, the example that you gave there, you said it's sort of not very sexy. But let's be honest, I mean, it's not just sort of the pointy end of the stick that we need to be working on here when it comes to our military capabilities and the speed and how AI can help us there. So, Sten, I want to come across and ask about some of the organizations that Plural is investing in. One that may think not quite at the pointy end of the stick as such is Labris. Can you tell us about Labris and tell us what it's doing in order to help provide critical battlefield advantage that traditionally it's not there?
I think Labris is basically building on top of the two themes that you guys raised. It's like you cannot build like fancy AI solutions unless you have reliable data underneath. And secondly, we talk all day long and the news headlines about defense tech tend to be on the kinetic side of things and we need to build drones faster, we need to do all these things and there are companies doing an amazing job like Helsing with those. But there is, when you go to a military man or an officer and ask what's actually missing, very often you run into way more mundane problems. Like, hey, the way I know where water and tents are in the forest is in Excel. And this sort of mundane set of issues, something where you can solve something relatively simple and something in private sector we take for granted and have a massive impact on the efficiency of our defense. I think this is a domain that I'm very intrigued about. And Labris is an example of that. So basically, if you look at Estonian or Finnish or basically the Eastern flank, so the defense doctrines, it's typically we talk about total defense. Like when something happens, then the entire population joins in. When you start thinking about it, how does that work? How do you get 2 million Finns? Or how do you get 2 million civilian boats in Sweden to do things? How do you get 500,000 Estonians to move together in sync when needed? What's the tech stack for that? And you talk to people in military, and for communication, you have Harris radios, and you have these encrypted systems. And when Estonian and Latvian infantrymen go to the forest to practice in NATO exercise, it takes them 2 days to exchange encryption keys. Like it's like these pockets of comms, and if you need to get 100 local firemen on that system, you can't. And so Labris builds the software platform for that. So they built a set of tooling which allows you to onboard mixed military, civilian networks of people, securely verify who they are, task them, get back imagery from them with confirmations, technical confirmations and auditability that this is what it is and the time and place of the images are correct and videos and so forth. And then you can even pay people using actually a very useful application in crypto in various places in the world, stable coins. And so if you are running a, let's say, operation in Middle East or operation across 5 European countries, you need to have a very mixed set of people collaborating and then feed data into all of these other processes that, hey, this is how we target, hey, this is how we gather intelligence. hey, these are the patterns that we're detecting, these are the decisions we can be making on top of that. So Labs is the glue basically for that. And it's also, I think, is an exemplary story, like a founder story, because it's a company started by a British Royal Marine and a British Army veteran. And they know the domain better than anyone else. They've never built a tech company before. And so bringing together people from those backgrounds and people from tech is basically the way we can make magic happen very fast.
Fantastic, and I love that because it is about that cooperation, the governments, the military, but also the civilians, also the humanitarian. That's why hopefully we had so many people that put their hands up, when it comes to cooperation in the audience. Let's listen to these guys. But we're tipping into here dual use, and I want to riff and continue on with that a little bit. So, Shon, I understand also that you're using Palantir and your AI systems for documenting war crimes and planning large-scale demining, something that's very close to my heart. From a strategic perspective, how valuable are these non-combat AI applications to the overall war effort? And is this representing a whole new pillar as such for military capability?
Well, I certainly believe that having the appropriate software tools to be able to leverage in non-kinetic means is so critical. With respect to Ukraine, you're right. We have been doing this now for quite some time. It's probably one of the most sophisticated deployments of our software that exists in the world. But as it turns out, about half of our business is in the commercial sector. And so while we deploy our software with commercial companies, many of whom are in the defense industrial base, so whether it's healthcare, whether it's energy, we have been helping those companies actually solve really complex problems. And as it turns out, many of those same problems we help those companies solve are the same problems that militaries around the world have as well. And then the converse is true. And so we can leverage experiences through those deployments and the use of AI in the real world to bring that to the military context. I would say that it's really important, especially for countries. So at some point, let's hope that the cessation of fighting will end. And for the Ukrainians to be able to identify, based on the underlying data asset that has been built, where war crimes have been committed. Similarly, they can also demonstrate through the data that exists how they have lived up to the rules of modern conflict. So as a nation, that helps them immensely, and all nations, these tools will help support their long-term viability, but even down to and including how do you use AI in the context of demining land so that they can reoccupy it. So these are some of the use cases that are being deployed today. And again, these aren't futuristic concepts that we're talking about. And my encouragement is always, you should buy what you can and innovate where you must. And if you can do that across like-minded nations, then the speed to value that you will create is quite significant.
Okay, but like you said, Shon, even if sort of conflicts were to cease now, tomorrow, we're not going back, okay? We're going to continue to accelerate how technology is changing conflict, our military, our defenses, and how we protect our borders. However, we don't just need data and technology to be able to do that. We need talent. Okay, Bertrand, you're a young agency. You mentioned you're scaling up very fast, so I'm imagining this is something that's key to you. What concrete non-monetary incentives can Europe be leveraging right now in order to help us recruit the best minds out there, the top 1%? And should military AI expertise be granted some kind of special status visas, as we see in other places?
So you want the secret recipe, right?
I'm sorry?
You want the secret recipe. No, I mean, I will still say something about monetary aspect, because there is this belief that governments aren't paying, which isn't entirely true. It's more a question of investment and also decision making. Like basically at some point you need to choose whether you are investing in, something. It's not just about AI, but about everything. And so it's just that if you are to invest into AI, then you have to invest into talent. And so you have to make it so that the monetary aspect is not really a question. Let me elaborate a little bit more on that. We are at a point right now where obviously, as I'm always saying to candidates, you're not going to be rich by joining the agency. This is not the way to do it. But you are going to be earning something that makes sense compared to the industry. Because I think this is a key thing. Like, whatever you think about the mission, about the purpose, at some point when, in some cases, when you had like something like a triple the salary for a different mission, it just doesn't work in the end. So I think we managed to reach a point where the monetary aspect is kind of out of the question. It's kind of like, hey, this is fine. The second part is we are based in Rennes, so this is probably one of the only agency in France that is kind of at the ministry level, but not in Paris, which costs me a lot of TGV rides between Paris and Rennes. But basically, we are offering also a different kind of living style. You live in Brittany. From my perspective, much nicer weather and space, but that's you can differ on that front. And so we have a lot of people who are looking for something different than Paris. Not saying this is bad. And so there is a population where there is an opportunity to do something different. And last but not least, and I would say even first and foremost, the mission. I think the war in Ukraine has sparked something in the tech industry that made everyone realize that this is a dangerous world, basically. We need to be ready, as you just said. And so there was this kind of a peak of will to contribute to a larger mission. And so we see a lot of people who want to make a difference. And they can do it in the industry. They join a lot of defense or not defense-based startups, but they also are interested in joining governments precisely to contribute more to that mission. And so what I see now, a year later, because if you had asked me that question a year before, I would say it's a bet. Now I would say it's successful because we hired, so that's the thing. But we see that the recipe is actually working. So is it we are not hiring a 200,000 people-sized company, just a few hundred, and I think this is the scale at which it's working. And maybe just to conclude on that front, I think the key thing is for me is one, hiring, but also getting a flow of talent, because I think this is one of the things I'm seeing in the US typically. You see people moving from Google, Palantir, Microsoft, Amazon, and everyone is working and moving from one company to the other. And one of my challenges and perspective is how do I get that flow in France, but maybe also in Europe more generally, in order to retain the talent that we managed to hire in the first place. And this one, I don't have an answer, but this is very much top of mind for me.
Okay, but Sten, as an investor, working with your portfolio and scale is super important from a talent perspective.
Yeah, I'm extremely bullish on Europe on talent. Actually, if you look at the development of startup ecosystems overall, they always start from the bottom up. And Europe doesn't have a talent problem. We have I don't know, usually people look at the US in awe and kind of feel bad about Europe. There is more top 200 universities in the world in Europe than US. There is about 100,000 advanced degree AI researchers in Europe. There is about 80,000 in US. Repeat founders create about 5,000 new companies a year in Europe, 4,000 in US. And part of it is just because Europe is 500 million, US is 350. Part of it is sort of our kind of self-deprecation that we have, that we kind of forget that. Mm-hmm. Now, Europe's challenge is how to grow these things to be very, very large. And so there's this bustling startup scenes in dozens of cities around Europe. But if you look at, okay, which companies have made it to 10 billion valuation, which companies have made it to 100 billion valuation, in the last few years, only Spotify has crossed the 150 billion mark now. And it takes decades for that, but we have a bunch of runners-up coming. So I think our challenge is to grow these companies big enough, exciting enough, ambitious enough, not sell them too early, build global champions from Europe. And the side effect of that is that we are already seeing people returning from US. Because people who went to work for SpaceX or Tesla or these companies 10 years ago, they didn't have places with equally exciting opportunities in Europe, basically. And now we see our portfolio companies hiring them, because if you're building a fusion energy plant, if you're building space capsules, if you're building AI that flies fighter jets, these people actually want to work on these problems, and they miss Europe, and they want to be back. So, and we're back. Amazing founders coming out of Palantir who were Europeans who went to work with Palantir, and now they're building the next company in Netherlands, for example. So this sort of circulation, I see that a lot. And the only two things that top talent needs is give me people to work with that are smarter than me so I can learn, and give me the hardest problems possible to solve. And once you have those two, people will flock to you.
I think it's a really important point, and we have so many, like a third of our company is European or calls Europe home. And as an example of your point is when NATO elected to deploy the software, I had so many engineers in the US saying, I want to come home, I want to be a part of doing my part for my nation and my continent and their national security. And so it was a really interesting dynamic, and so we see this internally quite a lot.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to get that European dynamic flowing here now that a few things have changed from the talent movement perspective. Sten, you just talked about what you believe that the European talent and startups need. But when it comes to investments, dual use tech is surging here right now. It seems defense tech and defense investment seems to be one of the things we hear about in the news every morning, and yet founders still face major bottlenecks when it comes to scaling. And there's a very fragmented procurement, investor hesitancy. What is your specific ask to European governments and to institutional investors out there to actually help us truly scale the European defense startups that we have, the kind of things that Plural are investing in to take us to the capacity that we need?
I think it's very often governments have this mindset that they need to do stuff to create a startup scene, where the reality is that usually they need to get out of the way. And that means removing all kinds of barriers, figuring out options taxation, which is still broken in many markets in Europe, figuring out like, I don't know, startup visas, some things that in Estonia I feel very happy about how we've solved those, and they've had a notable impact. We have a multi-digit, we have like 4 or 5% of GDP coming from early stage tech in this country. We have like 2% of working population in this country works in early stage tech companies. So you solve those, you have impacts. And so basically we need to use Estonia as an MVP, minimum viable country, and do that in Europe. One playbook that the only European Commission document I've seen founders read, most ambitious founders read in Europe and nod along and say that, yes, this is what we need, is the Draghi report. Mm-hmm. It's been way too long that's been out and no real action. And there are some, like just to pick a few examples from there's like stuff about capital markets. I think, again, like there are European governments that think about, hey, in order to help tech companies, we need to subsidize, we need to give grants, all of that. Yes, maybe in some deep frontier tech area you still need to, but in majority of cases it's about how do you release European pension funds money to go from US bonds to European venture capital, for example. Like these sort of shifts of assets that we already have, which are policy issues, friction issues, competence issues, but like it's not about like inventing new things, but sort of efficiently allocating what we have, I think.
Okay. Bertrand, for yourself, what do you believe is needed for us to be able to actually make the shift and scale to the capacity that Europe needs?
I think kind of back to what I said earlier, we need to be good clients, because I hear you. I think one of the things, I mean, the best service that governments can provide is being good clients. It's not subsidizing, it's just, what I want to be able to do is get a company, see a product, say, I'll buy it, I'll integrate it, we can do that, and you can go to the next client. Because right now, like when you look at I was talking about the processes, things you need to change, but if you get a startup, you say, oh, you have a nice product, and right now you're like, okay, so let's discuss, and you spend like 18 months discussing like how you're going to integrate, how you're going to pay, how you're going to put a contract together, and by the time you end up that process, like either the startup is gone or she's gone to the US. And so I think like the very first thing we need to do, and I'm doing, at least from my perspective, is being a good client and solving the problems that startups cannot solve on their own. I sort out my infrastructure, hosting capabilities and everything. and I get their products inside. I think this is the key part of my mission, and this is, I think, the best service we can provide to those companies.
Okay. We have just a few more minutes left, but I want us to project forward a little bit. Let's say we get everything that Sten and Bertrand here are looking at. We're going to reconvene this panel in a few years from now, and in the hope that these things have actually happened and that we are succeeding. What is the quantitative metric do you think that we should be pointing to and looking at beyond the budget, beyond the monetary allocations, okay, to actually prove that Europe is achieving AI competitiveness when it comes to sovereignty, defense, and security? Shon, what would you point to?
I was dreading you asking me that question first.
I saved the best till last.
Yeah, indeed. I would say a couple of things. One is, I think the ecosystem that's been referenced here and the health of that ecosystem from a defense perspective is likely to be measured by the number of European companies that can demonstrate through the work that they're doing and the contract values that they have procured and the capabilities that they actually have delivered, right, to each of our countries and into NATO. So that for me would be one. The threat is so significant that if that does not happen, then I worry about our collective defense. And so that would be one metric. The other is I think this notion of preparedness today, which is so many things that we could pursue, that these companies could deliver. How many of them are actually delivering something that's real and valuable and it strengthens our overall defense? That's not something that I think we talk about as much as we should, but we desperately need to, because the threat is significant. When you have an adversary that will allow a machine and an algorithm to talk to an algorithm to deliver a kinetic outcome, they don't value human life the same way we do. And so that in and of itself, should spark, I think, a lot of young companies to be able to help solve these problems that persist across many nations.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned there also sort of the collectiveness element and NATO, and I think one of the things is also sort of how we're defining what the West is and how we work together now. Bertrand, for your quantitative 5 years from now, say, what will you be looking at and measuring?
The number of times AI strategy words are pronounced in government speeches. I mean, if that goes to zero, because, everyone likes to have strategies. I said that earlier. And the reason why we have strategies is because we are failing at something. And so if we don't need a strategy anymore to do AI and to do things, it means that we have been successful into integrating AI and kind of all the digital specs into daily operations and daily thinking. And so whenever we get leaders to just not think about AI, but just think about what we need, capabilities delivering, it means that we will have solved probably a lot of problems behind what we try to fix with AI strategy. So if my job is gone in 10 years from now, I'm happy.
Okay, so yeah, very much then when it's no longer about the AI, because the mindset shift has changed and it's fully integrated. We've got that cooperation going on, people. Sten, over to you.
I would look at how can we flip. Europe today talks about defense spending. How would the world look like if we talk about defense income? Like, instead of this being a cost item that we spend 2%, 3%, 5% of our national product on defense, like if Europe builds the tech, builds the AI tools, builds the companies, builds the solutions that the world needs, and for example in defense, that like anything that you build on ground-based warfare to effectively work with drones and against drones, like these things, this is happening in Ukraine, this is happening in Europe. So probably our tech 5 years from now will be better than anything that US can build domestically. So all of that is exportable. export means income, more capital flowing to Europe to acquire these solutions, and that's how we don't pay for defense, but defense pays for our well-being.
Well, I very much look forward to reconvening this panel in a couple of years' time and not mentioning AI, talking about how we're cooperating differently across the boards, but then also seeing how we're not only benefiting maybe our economies, but also our societies as a result of these efforts. Gentlemen, thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.